Hello, everyone. In late October, I shared a video about the rich young ruler who wanted to know how he could achieve eternal life. An interesting point here is this. Clearly, he was a believer, or he wouldn't have asked Jesus the question. That makes the next statement a very important one. Jesus didn't tell him his "I believe" was all he needed for that life. Instead, Jesus told him he had to do something, sell all he has, and give the money to the poor. So when we are told by well-intentioned pastors that all we have to do to get to eternal life is believe Jesus died on the cross, we have to ask ourselves this question: is that biblical? This story proves it is not. Jesus is very clear in his answer to this rich man that after we believe, we must do. My question today regarding this question is, might that rich person actually be you? At this point, you might be laughing because you know the word rich definitely doesn't apply to you. Perhaps you shouldn't be so sure. Listen carefully to these statistics. If you earn $35,000 or more a year, you are financially in the top 12% of the world's population. You are in the top 12%. Think about that for a moment. By the world standards, then, with an income of just $35,000, you are rich, very rich. The median income in the world is $3,000. So, your income of $35,000 plus is again more than 12 times the global income. Just think how many people in the world then consider you rich. Armed with this new definition of rich, places you and me in the same category as the rich young ruler. The only difference is we're not a ruler. Since the world considers you and me rich, what are we doing to honor God with our riches? Why am I asking that question? Because Jesus told the rich young ruler to sell everything he has, give it to the poor, and then he will have eternal life. Truth is, we can feel just how this ruler felt, because we might shudder if we hear that request from Jesus. Would we really sell all we have for Jesus? I doubt it. Fortunately, God hasn't asked that of us. What has he asked of us? It is found in Malachi chapter 3, where God explains that in regard to our riches, we rob him. The people found in Malachi 3 then ask, how do we rob you? God's answer? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse because you are robbing me. Wow. I was personally in my 50s before I heard those words. Perhaps you've never heard them. Now that you have, are you robbing God? Remember, according to the world's standards, you are rich if you earn more than $35,000 a year. God says you rob him if you don't tithe 10% of that income. 10% of $35,000 is $3,500 a year. You might say, I can't give $3,500 to the Lord. I have bills to pay. But God didn't say, if you can. He said, we must. You and I are robbing God if we don't give him 10% of our income. And one day, we'll have to answer for that. What about offerings? Those are actually gifts to God, beyond a required tithe. Some of you are saying, there is no way we can do all this and survive. I once said that too. But my husband and I knew we had to do what God requires. Then we read Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, where God says, quote, "Test me in this and see if I will not open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it." End quote. As much as my husband and I believed we couldn't make it if we tithed, our faith had grown to the point that we knew we had to tithe, and we simply trusted God to see us through, as he said he would. That was more than 30 years ago. We have not missed one penny we have ever given to the Lord, and our blessings have been too numerous to count. God keeps his promise if we simply trust him to do just that. Let's take a moment and recapture this very important message. First, most of us are rich by world standards, and we had no idea that was true. Second, God requires us to return to him the first 10% of our income. If we do not do that, we rob him. Third, if we do that, God has promised to pour out more blessings than we have room for. Finally, consider the words of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19, which supports exactly what Jesus told the rich young ruler. Quote, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up for themselves a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of life that is truly life." End quote. The words of verse 18 were those Jesus shared with the rich young ruler. Be generous and willing to share. The rich young ruler wasn't willing to do that. My question to you, are you willing? Thanks for listening. Remember, by the world's standards, you and I are rich. Jesus told us to be generous and willing to share. God told us to tithe and test him. I can attest to the fact that it works. God does what he promises. Have a very blessed week. See you Thursday.